Within Studio One, there's a ton of different options and settings that you can make use of to make your workflow and your life just much easier. And you can have much more fun when you're using the application. So if there are certain things that you've been scratching your head about and you're like, well, why doesn't it do it this way? Hopefully by the time that we finish this video, you'll see some things that will be enlightening and help to make your time working in Studio One much more pleasant. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into this, and we'll start with a couple of basic things on the start page here. Now, you can see we have our recent songs list here, and this is going to dynamically update. So as you work on songs, this will become populated more and more. And I've seen some of my clients, they have just tons of songs listed in here. And there's a little pin here if you come all the way to the left. So if I were to click while that pin is active, we'll click on this one and this one here. So now these are going to be pinned within the recent files list. And then when we come to the top, after we click these, there's now this disclosure arrow that comes up, and we can click on that, and we can easily access all of the pinned songs that we have selected here. So if you have tracks that you want to keep around and access very quickly and on a regular basis, definitely make use of the pin icon here. And I'll go ahead and deselect these, and then after that's finished, you can see that that folder at the top goes away. Now keep in mind, this is a little bit kind of hidden. I think a lot of people miss this. We do have a search feature, so if you have a ton of songs, you can always search at the top there. Now let's go ahead and Control N to create a new song, and there's a setting here at the bottom that I'd like to point out, and that is stretch audio files to tempo. I can't remember if this is on by default or not, but if you have this selected, any audio files that you import into Studio One, if they have BPM data encoded into the file, then Studio One will stretch those audio files to fit your song tempo. So if you're bringing songs into Studio One and they're changing the pitch or how they're playing back, doing some funky things, definitely come and check out this stretch audio files to tempo setting here. Now you can always turn this off within your song, within the inspector of the track, but just be aware that this setting is available on your new track dialog window here. So we're going to go ahead and click OK and head over to the song page. Now the next thing that I want to take a look at is customization. This is a relatively new feature, and if we come to the toolbar up here at the top, we can right click, we can see we have customize. Now we can click on a tab in the browser as well. We have customize, as well as the transport customize there, and we can do that in the inspector as well. But we'll come up to the toolbar, let's select customize, and now we're presented with this window here. You can see our toolbar here, and I have some things that are unchecked. And if you notice, my toolbar may look a little bit different than yours. That's because I've created my own preset here. Now by default, if we click on this drop down menu here and I choose complete, then this is going to be the default setting. We're seeing everything that Studio One has to offer as far as our transport control, our tools, the tabs at the top of our browser, as well as what we have available within the inspector after we've actually added a track or events. Now we can also select basic, which is going to parse these back even more. We then have minimal, so we have even less displaying there, and then we have audio editing. So just be aware that you have these options, these presets, but you can come in and tailor this to your own liking so that you're only seeing what you absolutely need to see, and then you can come to the paper icon here and store that as a preset. As I've done here, I'll come back to my Quanta 1 preset. Okay, and so now I've got everything that I would like to use for when I'm working on my music. Now the next thing we're going to look at is track and event color customization. So I'm going to come to the Files tab here, and I'm going to just drag a file in here. Okay, we'll close out the browser, and let's Shift E to make this a little bit larger vertically. Now we recently had the ability to really customize the colors that we see within Studio One. So if we come to the side here, we have this color bar, and if I click once on that, then we open up a color palette. Now this is my own palette that I've put together, but what's important here is this downward facing arrow. So if I click on that, we have this color wheel where we can create our own custom colors and then store those as a preset. We can also come to the load preset area here, and we can choose 256 colors. CGA, here are the default colors, fade to black, HTML, neon, here's my pastel, pH scale, version 5 colors, So you get the idea. I'll switch this back to my pastel. And if you'd like more information on creating your own custom colors, check out the link in the top right corner here, because I did a whole video on creating your own color palettes. But just know that you can access that by clicking on the downward arrow like so. Now the next thing we'll take a look at is event appearance settings here. So I'm going to Control comma to bring up our options menu. Let's pull that down a little bit here. And we'll come over to the advanced. And then down at the bottom we have a section for event appearance. And you can see we have show events names, which is going to refer to this name in the top left corner. We have show envelopes on instrument parts. So if we've added part automation, for instance, then that's going to show up within our event here. We have show chords on track. So if you're using the chord detector, those are going to show up on the bottom of our event. And we have draw events translucent. Grid lines shine through. So you can see here, we can faintly see the grid lines coming through, and that's because this is selected. If I were to uncheck that, as well as our event names, and let's apply that, you can see that our name has gone and we can no longer see our grid lines. So just some options that you have available for your events to be aware of. Let's go ahead and apply, and I'll take that back to how I had it before. Let's go ahead and click OK to close out of there. Now let's zoom out a bit, and I'm going to select this event and press D as in dog to duplicate this a few times. And then we'll right click on the ruler here. And we have loop follows selection, which we can also use the shortcut keys, Control, Alt, and P. But I'll go ahead and select that. And then now, once we've activated this feature, when I click on an event, you can see our loop is then surrounding this event. Let's go ahead and activate that loop by clicking here in the transport. We can also press the / on our QWERTY keyboard. But as you can see, as I select an event, that loop region is going to follow our selection. So I'm going to Control, Alt, and P to turn that off. And then now when I select the events, we see our loop remains on the initial one here at the beginning. Coming back to the ruler, we also have a Enable Play Start marker. We can activate that by Alt and P. So this is going to be added wherever we have our playback cursor positioned. So I'm going to position it at bar 17. And then let's come here again. And so that's Enable Play Start marker. That's Alt P for the shortcut. Now you can see we have this green marker that shows up. Now, if I were to position the playback cursor on bar 29 and I press the space bar to play back, you see we pop back here, okay, to where we added that. If I come to bar 5, position the cursor there, I'll press the space bar again, you can see we're starting at that point there. So this may be useful for some of you, maybe not for others, but just know that that's available there. Let's go ahead and turn that back off. And again, clicking on the ruler, right-clicking, we have a secondary ruler that's available to us. So if we would like to see seconds, by default we're going to be on bars and beats, but we can add a secondary ruler and have it display seconds or samples or frames. So I'll go ahead and select seconds, and then now we can see seconds, 1 minute and 10 seconds here at bar 42. And we can also activate this secondary ruler by coming to the global track visibility button, and then we can see we have ruler here. So if I click on that, then that's going to take that off. Now let's go ahead and select these last 3 events, and I'll remove those out, and let's zoom in a bit. And the next thing I want to take a look at is audio event settings. So when we right click on an audio event, we have a ton of options here in this light gray area here. So at the very top, we can double click and rename that event if we'd like. And I accidentally selected loop, and that looped that event, and that will go all the way to the end marker or to the nearest audio event that's on this track. So we have that available. Now we can also change the tempo. We can speed it up. So if I were to put in 0.5, it's going to play back at half speed. We can transpose in semitones, tune and sense. We can add bend markers and adjust their threshold, or rather view our bend markers. We can add a gain envelope, so you can see a horizontal white line here. And when that's added, we can then come in and add points and make some adjustments to the gain at specific areas within our event. Let's right click again, and we'll take that off. We can create a sync point. We can time lock it so that this event will not be moved when we click and drag it if by accident. We can edit lock to prevent from accidentally editing that event. And then as you saw, we have our loop. Now let's come over to the browser and we will come to the instruments section. Let's bring in a MIDI, close out our browser, and we'll close this out as well. Let's double click to add a MIDI part. And if we right click on this, we have similar options, not as many as with the audio event, but here we can transpose in semitones, we can adjust velocity and percentage, time lock, edit lock, we can loop as we saw with the audio event, and we can create a sync point. So we have a few options for our MIDI parts there. Now let's go ahead and bring back that MIDI, and I'm going to choose a preset here. Let's come to the pad. I'll choose the dark pad here. And let's double click on our MIDI part to open up the editor. Let's make that a little bit larger. And I'm going to hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom in a bit. So I'm just going to double click to add a few notes in here. Let's click, hold, and drag to select them all. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to extend those to the part end. And we created a pretty long part here. So you may have had an experience where you have long notes. I'm sure not as long as this, but let's double click on this again. Now, if we were to go ahead and start to play back from the beginning, our playback cursor is at the beginning of bar 1. Let's mute our piano, come back to the beginning with a comma. Okay, so we can hear that playing back, but if we were to start playback from, say, bar 5, we don't hear anything. If we come to bar 7, nothing. Bar 8, nothing. So I'm going to press comma to come back to the beginning of this chord. And now we do have our audio from the MIDI. So there is a setting for chasing long MIDI notes, and we can activate that by coming to the options menu. I'll control comma. Let's pull this up a bit. And we'll come to the MIDI tab. And then here you can see we have chase long notes. And I'm not sure if this is on by default or not. I turned it off to demonstrate in this video, but we'll go ahead and turn that back on. And I'm going to apply. Okay. Let's come back to the beginning of the song. That works as normal, but then we'll position the cursor here at bar 4. And we have playback there. Let's zoom out. I'll position at bar 7. And we have playback there. Let's close out our editor. And actually, I'm moving too quickly. Let's double click again to come back to the editor. And we'll make this a little bit larger. Actually, let's go ahead and make this full screen by clicking on the up arrow and maximize that. So I just want to quickly mention that in the editor here, we have our part automation lane where we can work with velocity, our note controller, sound variations, and so on. Now, you may have an instance where you want to work with a couple of different parameters at the same time. And let's come back to the beginning here. We can see our velocity for this chord. So just be aware that we have a few buttons down at the bottom here. This one here is going to show and hide the part automation lane. Now we have this plus where we can add a second lane. We can add a third, as many as we'd like. When we hover at the borders here, we can adjust the size of each. So we can have different tabs open and work with these in relation to each other if you have a situation where you ever would like to do so. To remove, we can just click on the minus, and we'll take this back to just having the 1 here. Let's reattach the edit window. We'll pull that down and close it out. Now, something else to be aware of for working with our tracks is that we have a wrench icon with a plethora of options within here. So once we click on this, we have different sections here. So the first is going to be for selection. So solo follows selection. If you solo a track and then you click on another, the next track will be soloed and so on. So there's a ton of things here. I would just urge to read the descriptions here, and you may find some things that may have been driving you crazy about how Studio One functions. And they can be changed here. For instance, colorizing your track headers there. We even have our show events names option here, which we saw in the options menu, but you can easily access it here. And we have a couple of monitoring options that you may want to check out down at the bottom. Okay, now we have the same wrench icon and some similar options within the mix console. So here to the left at the top, we have that wrench icon. And so here we can adjust how the mix console displays things and how it functions. So we can view input controls, for instance. So now we have gain control and polarity. We can view VCA connections, group assignments, channel notes, and so on. So a ton of different options that you can make use of here. Let's close that out and our mix console as well. Now to finish up, we're going to head to the options menu with control and comma. And I'd like to head over to the external devices section to begin with. Now, down at the bottom, we have this setting here, notify me if devices are unavailable when Studio One starts. Now, this is for if you have set up a MIDI controller and it's usually plugged in when you start Studio One is going to launch with no problem. However, if you happen to have that MIDI keyboard disconnected from the USB port on your computer, Studio One can pause in midway while it's trying to load and present you with a notification saying, hey, the MIDI device is not here. And it's basically going to prevent Studio One from loading. So if that drives you crazy, just know that you can deselect here, and then when your MIDI keyboard is disconnected, if you don't need to use it when you launch a session, Studio One's going to go ahead and continue loading without showing you that warning that the device is disconnected. Now next we'll head over to the audio setup tab, and then here at the bottom we have release audio device in background. Now I've received a lot of comments from people saying that they try to use Studio One and YouTube at the same time, and when they switch over to YouTube, it's not coming through their audio system. And that's going to be because this is deselected. So when you have this unchecked, Studio One's going to grab your audio interface and take control of it and not relinquish control of it. If you would like to use other media applications or your web browser to view YouTube Quanta tutorials while you're working in Studio One, then you can just check this box here, and then Studio One will release your audio device once you switch to that other application. Now next, let's hop over to the locations and take a look at something that I think is incredibly important. And that's going to be the setting here, ask to copy external files when saving document. So let's say that you downloaded some files from online, audio files or samples that you want to use within your song, and you imported those into your song from your desktop. You save your song, you move the files to another location, and the next time you open your song, it says that the files are missing. And that's because Studio One is looking for those files on your desktop, but they've been moved to another location. This setting here, when you have it checked, is going to prevent that from happening, because when you import the files into your song, Studio One will then ask you when you go to save if you would like to copy those external files to the song folder that you're working with. So this is going to keep everything in one single location, and you can move your folder wherever you'd like on your system, and those audio files will then be within that song folder in a media folder. So this is incredibly useful to be aware of and make use of. Now, to finish up, we'll just take a look at the color scheme and appearance options that we have here. So we can make adjustments to our user interface by making use of these sliders here. So you can just go to town and adjust Studio One to however you would like. We've got arrangement. This is setting specifically for the arrangement area, the contrast, and we can alter our plugins so that they can be dark, light, or colored, as well as changing the view for our score editor, whether it's going to be light with a white background or dark. We also have some presets here, so if I click on this, we can choose, say, the colors, blue moon, camouflage, dark star. So a lot that you can experiment with here. You can add your own after you've made settings and you're happy. You can store that as a preset. So when we come back to the load preset, I have this Quanta 1. When I select that, then we return to the settings that I've made and stored as a preset. Okay, so I hope that you have found some useful nuggets in this video. And if you have any questions about other settings, feel free to leave a comment below. Also know that I do provide one-on-one training if you'd like to speed up your learning curve for Studio One, or if you're having technical issues, whether you're a beginner or advanced. Check out the pinned comment below or the description area of this video for more information on that. The sessions are done over Zoom, and you can share your screen with me and even allow me control of your Studio One application so I can show you directly all of the concepts and topics you would like to learn. The meeting can also be recorded so that you'll have a video file for reference of everything that we discussed during the meeting. Okay, so we'll wrap up here. Thanks for watching. Hope you're doing well. And I also hope to see you in the next tutorial.